There's a quote from the novel. Someone says there's a discrepancy between Annie's demeanor and the undercurrent of rage in her art, because she's actually somewhat quiet. She comes across as a quiet person, and her anger surprises certainly her husband. He was not expecting to see that in her art. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about this idea of the power of art to express what we can't express otherwise, and also why Annie is a visual artist versus, say, a violinist or a songwriter. So.
Well, I think Annie, to some extent, is an outgrowth of me. And what I mean by that is that I have always had a visual orientation. When I went away to college, my plan was to become an art major, not an English major. But then literature began to sort of capture me, and I took a different turn, ended up being a high school teacher for a number of years, and then a university teacher. And then for the past 15 years, I have, I've taught in a volunteer capacity. I've taught writing to women who are incarcerated. As far as Annie's anger and the expression of it and those deep, dark secrets that she's keeping, that really relates, I think, directly to the experiences that I've had with these incarcerated women. And I would have to say that I probably have learned as much or more from them than I've taught them. The workshops are run so that they can write any genre they want, and they can write any subject matter they want or need to write. But I've seen over time now, I've seen over and over what happens is that, well, there's lots of times a real link between a terrible childhood and a woman who finds herself in prison. And a lot of that terrible stuff has to do with incest and sexual abuse when she was a kid, when she was a little girl. And so I've seen over and over women who don't necessarily trust me or one another at first when they enter the program, but eventually, after writing a bunch of tame things, my family's trip to Disney World and that kind of thing, suddenly they take the leap, they take the risk, they begin to trust us, the rest of us, and they begin to take on the tough stuff, which lots of times has to do with their childhood. And I deal with women who, most of the women that I deal with, the women, oddly enough, who stay in the program from year to year, have committed acts of violence or taken a life. And lots of times, more often than not, this is their only crime. So they kept it in, like Annie, and then one day it came out, all in a terrible and violent way. And so I think, I didn't pattern Annie after any specific woman that I've dealt with and taught, but that's part of that education I've received. And I know that this is an oversimplification, but I think culturally, women are encouraged to keep it in, and whereas men can, go to the bar and punch the guy on the next stool. So I think that there is this implosion that happens in Annie, and then of course there is a related explosion by one of her 3 kids that comes later in the novel.
Exactly.